Hello there everybody, and welcome to part 2 of our comic book tutorial video. I hope you had fun in part 1. If you haven't done it yet, maybe now's the time to do so and come back to this video then. But we're going to do part 2 now. Okie dokie then, before we go any further, because don't worry, we are going to get down to drawing and cartooning in a second. It's going to be really great. But before we go any further, I just want to show you my friend here, the story mountain. Now the story mountain is really important because it can help us plot our story. Now we know what's happened in this story, so what I wanted to do is take this story and then put it into our story mountain here. So the story mountain begins at the beginning. It's a very fine place to start. And then we move up to the build up, then we go to the problem, then we go to solving the problem, and then we go to the ending. Now, sometimes some stories deviate or go away a little bit from this, but this is a good basic way of thinking about how a story works. So I wonder if you could have a little think at this point now. Maybe in a second you could pause this video and have a think about which parts of the story make sense like this when we add it to our story mountain. So we start with the beginning, what happens at the beginning, have a think. And then we build up the story. So how does this story build up? Then we introduce a problem, so that's like an issue, something goes wrong. What goes wrong in this story, or what does our hero, Perseus, have to do have to face in this story? What does he have to face in the story? And then we have to solve that problem. So how is the problem solved in this story? And then we have an ending as well. So pause this video and give yourself a little bit of time to think. You might want to draw out your own story mountain. You might want to jot some ideas down. You might just want to have it in your brain, but make sure you have a little think about how the story of Medusa and Perseus works in terms of a story mountain. Just pause the video and I'll see you in a second. Okay then, so you should have just had a little think about how this story mountain works in terms of our story, the Medusa and Perseus story. I've had a little think and I think I might have sussed it a little bit. I wonder if you agree. So, for the beginning, I think the beginning of this story is when the king wants to marry Danae, Perseus' mother, and Perseus says, well, basically, I'll go and get Medusa's head, and then you won't do that, because he doesn't want, well, Perseus' mum doesn't want to marry the king. And that is the beginning of the story, that sets it up. And then the build-up, it builds up, the story builds up by him going to get he gets the shield from the gods, and he also finds out where Medusa's lair is. So the story starts to build up here, and we find out more and more about Medusa. And then, the problem is facing Medusa herself, isn't it? Because we know that Medusa can freeze people, like turn them into stone simply by looking at them. So that's a pretty big problem, I'd say. And then Medusius, who is that? I mean Perseus. Perseus solves the problem of Medusa, so solving the problem here, he solves that by chopping her head off, basically. That's a pretty strong way of solving the problem in terms of Greek mythology, isn't it? Chopping someone's heads off kind of ends it there for Medusa. And then we move on to the ending. So the ending at the bottom here is when he gets back to the king, and basically the king says, sorry mate, I've decided against our plan. I'm going to renege on our deal. I'm going to go back on what we said. And Perseus isn't too pleased about that, is he? So he pulls out Medusa's head and freezes the king. So we used 10 plot points there, and I think all 10 of those plot points when we did the story of Medusa and Perseus, or that I created before, I think they all fit in here in some. Maybe it's 2 per 1, I don't know. Each story is different, but that's just a nice way to think about how we structure the story. Because as wonderful as comic books are, if they didn't make sense, if they didn't have a story, they wouldn't be half as interesting, would they? Alright then, here's the big bit. This is what we need to do now. We've planned out our comic book. We've thought about story structure, we've realised that there's a beginning, a middle and an end, there's a problem to overcome, and we have jotted these all down on our pieces of paper, I hope, by now. So now comes the exciting bit. Now comes the bit where we do our drawing and we add some text, we add some writing to the boxes. So you might have noticed on yours that there are these bubbly thingy-majigs here. Interesting, aren't they? Now we can use those so that the characters can speak. So if, for example, I have here that Perseus finds out where Medusa's lair is in this box, I might have a picture here of maybe one of the hags or the women telling him, and maybe I put a bit of speech in that box. Or I might even want to do Perseus, for example. I might have a picture of Perseus here and have Perseus saying thank you to the hags because he finds out where the lair is. There's also other little boxes on our comic strip, isn't there? On our template, there's a box here and there's a box here. Now in those, we can write some detail to make it really clear to the audience or to the reader what is happening in our comic book. So I might say in my very first one, once upon a time, the king denies hand in marriage. Just to make it really clear straight away that we know what's going on. I could write that in that box there. Just so the detail is added to what the audience can already see from the picture. So the writing that we have at the top needs to match the picture as well, but it makes it even clearer. It gives more detail to the audience and sometimes might help with our story's narrative, the way that we tell the story. So have loads of fun with these as well. You might notice on this, a thought bubble here. So with that is a thought bubble where we can show the reader what our character is thinking. So in this, Perseus gets back to Seriphus, but the king tries to get out of the deal. That's what I'm going to do in that box. So in that box, I might do the king having one of his evil thoughts, and I might say what that thought is. Or I might have Perseus who's thinking, I'm not having any of that, king. But maybe he doesn't actually want to say it out loud because the king's guards might get him. It's just a thought. So we can do that in a thought bubble. So have fun with those. The thought bubbles, you might notice, tend to have these 3 circles here and then go into like a cloud form, whereas the speech bubbles down here have this kind of weirdy thingy midget. It almost looks a little bit like a really big comma in a way, but you can write inside those for speech and you can write inside those for thought bubbles as well. You might also have noticed here a big kind of explosion or something. Now I'm thinking in that you could even add in a tiny little extra bit of a picture if you wanted to, or you could use a onomatopoeic word, a word that sounds like it, basically. So I'm thinking words like BAM, because BAM sounds like BAM, doesn't it? It's onomatopoeic. So you might say BAM because there's a big bang. You might say WOW because there is a moment there that's really exciting, really important. You might want to use an onomatopoeic word there as well. It's up to you. You might want to do a little picture. You might want to add in a little bit of extra narration there. You might want to use that as an extra little text box. You can utilize it in the way that you want. Use it however you want. Make it personal to you. Make it as exciting as you possibly can. Okay, so here's your first task. I would like you now, or your next task, I would like you to draw the first box in our story. Just the first one for now. Do the first box in your story and add in some writing in your text box up here as well to make it clear how the story starts. So just do the first box for now, and when you've done that, come back to this video and I'll see you there. Alright then, by now you may well have done your first box and I'm certain that it looks absolutely fantastic. I hope you had loads of fun with it. I hope that you've added lots of colour. You might want to go around the outlines of some of your drawing with black pen to make it stand out even brighter. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to share with you my box number 3. I decided to do box number 3 just because well, I'm certain that your box number 1 is better than anything that I could do. So I'm just going to show you what I did for number 3, just a random box, and there it is there. I also put in the word wow and used some colour around that, and I decided to do box number 3, which is when, in my story, yours might be different, but in my story, this is when Perseus receives his shield and he receives his sword from the gods. I made sure that they were silver, because it needs to gleam, doesn't it? So I decided to go with silver for the sword and the shield. And I also used some words in there as well. You might be able to see them. It says, a gift from the gods. A gift from the gods, because those items were a gift from the gods. So I decided to make that clear. I added some colour around the side because it's quite an exciting thing to happen. So I tried to highlight how exciting it was to get these really amazingly fantastic shield and sword, because Perseus was super happy to receive them. Without them, he may well have struggled to conquer Medusa, mightn't he? So here's what you need to do now then, everybody. I need you to complete your comic book. I did my picture here in box 3 just as an idea as what one of them might look, but you could do that differently. You might actually show the Perseus himself with a really excited look on his face when he receives them. It's up to you. There is more than one way to tell a story. Take as long as you need and try your best to make it as exciting as possible. As I mentioned, if you want to go around your images with black pen, I did just to kind of make them highlight a little bit more, to make them a little bit more obvious. You don't need to do that, but just make it as exciting as you possibly can. Get loads of colour in there. Make sure that the story has the right arc. Make sure that it goes in the right order, as we said, and I hope that you have fun producing it. I really hope I get to see some of these because I bet they're so amazing. So, have fun with your creating a comic book, and I will see you very soon indeed. I've been Jacob from Storyhouse for Passion for Learning. It's been great having fun with you today, and I'll see you really soon. Goodbye.